going to cover is the principle of establishing high agreement of both what and how. Now, in a word, to most people this means standardization, but we'll come back to why the words establish high agreement are so important. Now, the definition of this from a behavior standpoint, again, we always start with behaviors, is valuing a common way more than we value our own way. That's the behavior that has to accompany any form of standardization to actually achieve high agreement. For example, my wife and I might disagree about where in the kitchen the salt and pepper should be stored, and we might have our own way in which we do that. But if we continue with our own way, well then it's going to be very wasteful. We're going to go back and forth looking for where the other person put it. Having a common way is far more productive an answer, even if it's not our own way and our own choice. So this definition is valuing a common way more than we value our own way. Now, the word establish high agreement is also important. The point is that this is an active activity. It's not about having a standard, it's about the act of establishing high agreement. So for one, the process matters. How you go about creating standardization does matter. The process of studying what works, of testing, etc., and even making the documents useful for people is the process of establishing that high agreement. The other aspect is that it has to be continual. We don't just set a standard and then set and forget, because things change all the time. New people, new expectations, new customers, variables that we might not have even predicted change, along with the idea that we have opportunities to improve. So it's not about having a standard, it's about the continual process of establishing high agreement. Now, why do I prefer the term establish high agreement over standardization? Well, it's really about the implication of who establishes it. When people hear standardization, they feel like a standard is being implemented to them by someone else. Often by someone that might have some expertise, but doesn't know as much about my work as I might know. And so it's really about who does it. Establishing high agreement is about establishing it with the people that are involved in the work, those who are closest to the work, and ultimately who will be the customer or user of any form of standardization that we might create. So I don't care if you use the word standardization instead of establish high agreement, but it's about how we approach it, our behaviors and our mindset in thinking about standardization and its creation that really makes the difference. So with the principle of establish high agreement of both what and how, the second part of this is important as well, both what and how. It's important to get both aspects of this right. So on this example, if we don't have either, if we don't have high agreement of what we're trying to accomplish or how we're trying to accomplish it, we end up with something very vague and unclear and unpurposeful. We might say quality is number one, but that doesn't help anybody. It certainly doesn't allow us to achieve that result. If we focus on high agreement of what, we might make a statement like, don't pass on defects. And that makes it clear what we're trying to accomplish. We don't want defects to move from one stage of work to the next. But then we have to add the high agreement of the how. So the how could be surface problems immediately. When you see a problem, you immediately surface it, bring it to light so it can be addressed immediately. Now when you put all that together, when you get high agreement of both what and how, you might get something like Toyota's example of the end-on process. If within the work cycle they find a problem, which is clearly defined as an abnormality, they immediately surface that problem, and it gets addressed before they allow that work to move on to the next segment of work. This establishes both high agreement of what they're trying to accomplish and how they're trying to accomplish it. Now, if you ever sit in a meeting and you think you end up with an agreement at the end of a meeting, and a week later you talk to someone else in that meeting, and it feels like you were in a completely different meeting, there's a pretty good chance that you had high agreement of the what, but you lacked high agreement of the how. We really have to allow for both of these to come together, because it's only in that high agreement of both do we have a much higher percentage chance of actually achieving what we wanted to achieve. Establish high agreement of both what we're trying to accomplish and how we plan to accomplish it. Now, as we talk about why standardize, we have to get specific. So often I hear people say, well, standardization is lean, standardization is good, and so therefore we should standardize everything. But not only is this unconvincing for most people, it actually leads to some poor implementations of standardization efforts. Why? Because if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish with your standardization efforts, you might not actually accomplish them. So it helps to be very specific about what you are trying to accomplish. So here's some of the reasons about why you might standardize. One, reduce the risk and errors that might happen in a process. If you have to do 6 things right and you might forget one of them and you have a bad outcome, well, a little standardization might go a very long way to prevent you from making that one little mistake. This is perhaps one of the first reasons that people adopt it, because they're tired of the quality problems in their work. Be more efficient. Follow best practices. If somebody is twice as efficient as someone else, why not adopt their practices? If we get everyone on the best practice, we're more likely to be more efficient and have better outcomes. Don't reinvent the wheel. If one part of the organization created some training, why should another part of the organization reinvent it? Just simply following that standard can reduce a huge amount of investment in content, in courses, in systems of work, etc. But perhaps the closest to standardization equals good is being able to spot problems and improve. Without standardization, you can't really see what's normal and abnormal, and makes it difficult to spot problems when they do occur. Now again, this is sort of a close reason to standardize anyway, because it gives you this reason. But still, if that is your reason, it helps to be specific, because you can test your outcome by being able to tell, can I spot a normal condition from an abnormal condition? If I can't say yes to that, then I probably haven't achieved high agreement of both what and how.